I didn't quit in a blaze of glory. I didn't slam a laptop, flip a desk, or make some speech people would repeat in the break room. I left the way you leave a building you've been holding up with your shoulders for 22 years. Slow, careful, and with a weird kind of relief once the weight isn't yours anymore. I'm Brian Miller, 49 years old, and this is how I learned that loyalty has a price tag, and sometimes it's lower than you think. It started with a retention bonus announcement on a random Tuesday, the kind of corporate good news that's really just fear wearing a suit. I worked overnight operations for a mid-sized logistics software company, data flow systems, 800-plus employees processing shipments for clients like Mid-Atlantic Logistics and Regional Transport Solutions. Not glamorous, not tech startup exciting. More like if a customer's shipment stopped moving at 2:17 a.m., my phone would light up and I'd be the one staring at logs, rerouting queues, calling vendors, and keeping the whole thing from becoming a headline. Day shift got credit, nights got blamed. That's how it worked for 22 years. We had a small team, 5 of us rotating coverage. 2 were solid workers who knew their stuff. 1 was new, still learning which buttons not to push. 1 was a chronic busy person who was never actually available when things broke. And then there was Scott Henderson. Scott was the kind of coworker who made a point of sounding relaxed in every meeting. Always leaned back, always smiling like the job was easy, always saying things like, "Hey man, don't stress. Leadership loves us." While I was cleaning up messes he didn't even notice were happening. I'd trained Scott when he started 3 years ago, walked him through every system, every vendor quirk, every shortcut that kept things running smooth. He was quick to learn the basics, could handle routine ticket queues and standard escalation procedures, but he never dug deeper, never had to, because when the real problems hit, the legacy AS400 interface failures, the vendor API changes that broke our integration points, the cascade errors that required understanding systems built before he graduated high school, I was always there to handle it. Last month, Scott tried to restart the payment processing queue during a vendor timeout. Sounds simple enough, except he didn't check downstream dependencies first. Crashed 3 client integrations and triggered penalty fees. I spent 4 hours rebuilding transaction logs while he attended a process improvement meeting the next morning. So when leadership called an all-hands meeting and said they were rolling out retention bonuses for key roles, I already knew how it would go. I'd seen enough appreciation theater to understand the math. Praise is free. Panic is expensive. Our director, Lisa Patterson, did the usual warm voice routine. We're investing in our people. We want to reward commitment. We've identified critical contributors. Critical contributors. I laughed under my breath at that one. I was running nights, covering holidays, training new hires, and patching gaps in documentation that should have been written years earlier. If critical meant anything, it meant if he leaves, we're screwed. The meeting wrapped with corporate speak about competitive retention packages and recognizing exceptional value. Lisa mentioned that amounts would be communicated individually to ensure appropriate confidentiality. Translation: they didn't want anyone comparing numbers in real time. After the call, Lisa pinged people one by one to deliver amounts privately. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Keep everyone isolated so they can't organize or complain collectively. Scott got his call first. 20 minutes later, he came back into the team chat with fake humility. "Guys, wow, didn't expect that. They really showed love." Then he DM'd me a screenshot like it was a winning lottery ticket. $28,000. Not stock options that might be worth something someday. Not overtime pay tied to actual work. Cash bonus labeled retention incentive. Paid next cycle if he signed an agreement to stay 12 months. He added, "Told you, they know who matters." My stomach did something quiet and unpleasant. Not jealousy exactly, more like recognition. Because I already knew what mine would be. I'd been through enough appreciation cycles to understand how this worked. Lisa called me 10 minutes later. Video on, big smile rehearsed like she'd practiced in the mirror. "First, thank you. You've been such a stabilizing force on nights. Really, the backbone of our operations." I nodded because I'm trained. You nod when people compliment you so they can get to the part where they take something away. "We're offering you a retention bonus too. We're very excited about this." She paused like she expected applause or maybe gratitude in advance. $5,000. For a second, I thought she misspoke, like maybe she forgot a zero or mixed up her notes. I even waited for her to correct it. The way you wait for someone to realize they just said something completely insane out loud. She didn't. $5,000, she repeated, still smiling. And it comes with the same 12-month agreement as everyone else. I stared at her. $5,000. After 22 years. She kept smiling like she expected me to thank her. Okay, I said, because I couldn't trust my voice to do anything else. Lisa's smile tightened just a fraction. I want you to be clear. This reflects budget considerations, not your performance. You're extremely valued here. Right. My value just had a price tag, and it was apparently worth less than a used Honda Civic. When the call ended, I sat there in my home office with the lights off, monitors glowing blue in the darkness, listening to the building's HVAC system cycle on and off. My shift started in an hour. I should have been getting ready, grabbing coffee, reviewing the day's handoff notes from the afternoon crew. Instead, I opened my personal spreadsheet, the one I used to track my kids' college expenses, and typed $5,000 in a cell. Then I typed $28,000 under it. Below that, I added my current salary, $89,000 after 22 years. I didn't do it to torture myself. I did it because I needed to see the numbers in black and white. 22 years of experience versus 3 years. Legacy system expertise that kept million-dollar client operations running versus surface-level knowledge that crumbled under pressure. The math was crystal clear. It just wasn't in my favor. 7 days earlier, Scott had missed a critical alert because he'd stepped away from his desk. Bathroom break, snack run, personal call, didn't matter what. The alert was from Mid-Atlantic Logistics' primary data feed. Their nightly batch processing window was narrow, and if we didn't catch problems fast, their entire next-day operation could collapse. I'd been monitoring secondary systems when I noticed the backup queue filling up. 20 minutes after Scott's alert should have triggered, I was the one calling the vendor, rerouting traffic through our Atlanta data center, and manually processing stuck transactions. 4 hours of detailed work to prevent what would have been a 6-figure penalty and probably a lost client. Lisa thanked the team in a public email the next morning. Excellent teamwork, everyone. This is what collaboration looks like when we all stay focused. Scott had replied to the whole team, always got each other's backs. Now I was being offered what amounted to a gag bonus to handcuff myself for another year. And the worst part? Scott wasn't even the villain in this story. He was just the most visible symptom of something I'd been pretending not to see. I thought about my divorce settlement from 3 years ago. The alimony payments that would continue for 2 more years. My daughter Emma's tuition at State, $18,000 a semester. My son Jake starting at community college next fall, planning to transfer somewhere more expensive. $5,000 wouldn't cover 1 semester for Emma. Hell, it barely covered her textbooks and meal plan. But it wasn't really about the money. Not entirely. It was about what the money represented. After 22 years, after training half the current team, after keeping their systems running through every vendor disaster and infrastructure crisis, this was what they thought I was worth. My phone buzzed. Text from my ex-wife. Emma needs her fall semester payment by Friday. Can you handle it, or do I need to cover it again? I stared at that message for a long time. Jennifer had always been better at reading corporate politics than I was. She'd warned me years ago about getting too comfortable in the shadows, about letting other people take credit for my work. "You're too nice, Brian," she'd said during one of our last real conversations. "In corporate America, nice guys finish with small bonuses." That night started like any other. System monitoring dashboards spread across 3 screens, coffee getting cold while I worked through routine maintenance tasks. Around 11:30 p.m., I got the automated handoff report from day shift. Everything green, all systems nominal. At 11:47 p.m., the first alert came in. Dataflow's primary integration with regional transport solutions was throwing timeout errors. Not unusual. Their API had been flaky since they upgraded their servers last month. I pulled up the standard troubleshooting runbook and started working through the checklist. By midnight, things were getting worse. The timeout errors were cascading, causing our retry logic to overwhelm their endpoints. I needed to throttle connections and reroute through backup channels. Standard procedure, but it required updating configuration files that weren't documented in the runbook. That was when Scott messaged me, "Hey bro, seeing some weird stuff in the monitoring. You got eyes on this?" I looked at the error graphs climbing like fever charts. I looked at the retention agreement Lisa had emailed me earlier, sitting unopened in my inbox. 12 months commitment, immediate repayment if I left early, a clause about confidentiality of program details, another clause reminding me that at-will employment remains in effect. They wanted me locked in, but they wanted to keep themselves free. Yeah, I see it, I typed back. Working on it. Cool, thanks, man. You're the best with this legacy stuff. Legacy stuff. 22 years of accumulated knowledge reduced to legacy stuff. At 12:23 a.m., I opened the retention agreement for the first time. The language was dense but clear. $5,000 in exchange for 12 months of guaranteed availability. No mention of scope changes, no protection against increased workload, no promise of future recognition, just my signature on a line that said I was grateful for their investment in my future. I thought about Scott's screenshot again. $28,000. For someone who'd needed my help with basic system administration just last week. For someone who presented my solutions in meetings like they were collaborative efforts. For someone who got credit for stability I created while he slept. At 12:45 a.m., Regional Transport's errors hit critical mass. Their automated systems started failing over to manual processing, which meant expensive human intervention on their end, which meant penalty clauses in our contract would trigger if we didn't resolve this fast. I could fix it. I knew exactly what needed to be done. Update the load balancer configuration, modify the retry intervals, temporarily route traffic through our backup data center in Phoenix, maybe 90 minutes of careful work if everything went smoothly. Instead, I opened my laptop and started typing an email. At 1:15 a.m., my phone rang. Lisa Patterson, voice thick with sleep and irritation. Brian, I'm seeing alerts. Is this urgent? I watched the error count cross into penalty territory. Watched automated systems fail and fall back to expensive manual processes. Watched everything I'd spent 22 years protecting start to crumble in real time. Yes, I said, and my voice was steady in a way that surprised me. It's urgent. Okay, what do you need to fix it? I need fair compensation for my expertise. I need recognition that matches my contribution. I need a retention offer that reflects 22 years of institutional knowledge. Silence. Long enough that I could hear her breathing change. Brian, it's 1 a.m. Can we just focus on fixing the immediate problem? This is the immediate problem. You made a choice about what my knowledge is worth. I'm making a choice about how to use it. More silence. Then, we'll discuss this tomorrow. Just fix it for now. No, I said. I don't think I will. And I hung up. At 1:47 a.m., I did something I'd never done in 22 years of night shifts. I stood up, unplugged my headset, and took my badge off the lanyard like I was removing something that had never really belonged to me anyway. The error alerts kept flashing on my screens as I walked away. Red numbers climbing higher every minute. Systems failing in exactly the sequence I'd predicted they would. But for the first time in years, those weren't my problems to solve anymore. I didn't sleep after that. Not because I was panicking, but because my brain finally stopped trying to justify things that never made sense in the first place. After 22 years, I was done pretending that competence would eventually be rewarded fairly. I sat in my kitchen with coffee I didn't really want, watching the sun come up through my apartment window. My phone sat silent on the counter. No emergency calls, no frantic texts asking where I was. That told me everything about how they really viewed my role. Around 7 a.m., I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to day shift coverage, not because I was actually sick, but because I needed time to think without the pressure of another crisis demanding my immediate attention. By 9 a.m., my phone started buzzing. First, a Slack message from Scott. Yo, everything okay? Heard you had to bail early last night. Then a text from Lisa. Need to talk when you're feeling better. Some follow-up items from the overnight issues. No. Are you all right? No. What happened? Just operational concerns wrapped in fake consideration. I made a decision then. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Not angrily, not vindictively, methodically, like the engineer I'd always been. I pulled my performance reviews from the last 5 years. Everyone rated exceeds expectations or outstanding contributor. I downloaded my incident response logs, cross-referenced them with on-call rotations. Every major system save in the last 18 months had timestamps between midnight and 6 a.m. My initials were somewhere in every resolution chain. I also read the retention program fine print again. Really read it this time. It wasn't about retaining people like me. It was about retaining optics. The budget came from a discretionary pool Lisa controlled. Amounts weren't tied to any objective criteria, not performance ratings, not seniority, not technical expertise. They were tied to leadership perception, which was corporate speak for who makes us feel comfortable during business hours. Scott made them feel comfortable. He spoke their language in meetings, used the right buzzwords, presented problems as opportunities for collaboration. I made problems disappear in the dark where nobody had to think about them. But the more I dug, the clearer it became that the $5,000 wasn't just insulting, it was strategic, cheap insurance. If I signed, I'd be locked into nights for another year with a paper trail saying I was satisfied with the arrangement. If I walked away, they could point to the offer and say they tried to retain me. Either way, they won. That afternoon, HR sent their carefully worded email. We noticed you haven't acknowledged the retention agreement yet. Please let us know if you have questions or need clarification on any terms. I had questions. I just wasn't going to ask them through proper channels. Instead, I started making calls. Not to lawyers or competitors. To former colleagues who'd left Dataflow over the years. People who'd moved on to other companies, other opportunities. People who might have perspective on what my experience was actually worth. The conversations were eye-opening. Mike Rodriguez, who'd left for a senior architect role at TechStream Solutions, was making $118,000 base with day shift hours and rotating on-call that actually rotated. Sarah Kim had landed at Regional Data Systems as a team lead, $125,000 plus quarterly bonuses tied to system uptime. Brian, Sarah said during our call, you've been there too long. They're taking advantage of your loyalty. In today's market, someone with your background should be making at least $115K, probably more. That evening, Lisa called again. This time I answered. How are you feeling? She asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really want details. Better, I said. Good. We really need to discuss last night. Some clients are asking questions about the regional transport delays. I imagine they are. The thing is, Brian, we're seeing some ongoing stability issues. The team is concerned about coverage gaps. Translation. Scott couldn't handle the fallout from my absence, and now they were scrambling. What kind of coverage gaps? I asked. Well, some of the legacy system interactions. The documentation isn't as complete as we thought. And the vendor relationships, some of those are more personal connections that aren't easily transferred. I almost smiled. 22 years of institutional knowledge, and now they were discovering it wasn't as replaceable as they'd assumed. I see, I said. Look, I know the retention bonus discussions were complicated. Maybe there's room for adjustment. Can we set up a time to talk through your concerns? What kind of adjustment? I'd need to check with budget approvals, but I think we could potentially look at increasing the amount. Maybe $8,000, $10,000, I did the math in my head. Still less than half of Scott's package. Still a fraction of what I could make elsewhere. Lisa, can I ask you something? Why did Scott get $28,000? Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Those decisions involve multiple factors. Team dynamics, future potential, strategic alignment. He needed my help fixing a basic configuration issue last Tuesday. Brian, I don't think comparing individual situations is productive. Productive. That word again. Everything was productive when it served their interests. You're right, I said. It's not productive, it's just math. What do you mean? 22 years of experience, $5,000, 3 years of experience, $28,000. The math tells me everything I need to know about how you value experience versus, what did you call it? Strategic alignment? Another pause. I think we should have this conversation in person. Can you come in tomorrow? I don't think so. Brian, I need you to understand how critical your role is to our operations. Critical enough for $5,000. That's not... Look, let's just focus on moving forward. We need stability right now. I thought about Emma's tuition payment due Friday. I thought about Jake starting college next year. I thought about 22 years of nights, weekends, holidays spent keeping their systems running while other people got promoted, got raises, got recognition. You want stability? I asked. Yes. Then you should have offered me what I'm worth. What are you saying? I'm saying I won't be signing the retention agreement, and I won't be available for emergency coverage while you figure out what my expertise is actually worth to you. Brian, you can't just... I can, actually. At-will employment, remember? It goes both ways. I hung up and immediately felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the simple relief of finally telling the truth. Within an hour, my phone started ringing again. This time it wasn't Lisa. It was Kevin Walsh, VP of Operations, someone I'd spoken to exactly twice before, both times during major outages when normal escalation chains had failed. "Brian," he said, skipping any pretense of small talk. "We need to discuss the situation." "What situation is that?" "You know what situation. The systems are unstable. We're seeing cascading failures. Lisa says you have concerns about your compensation package, not concerns." "Clarity." "What kind of clarity?" I looked out my apartment window at the city lights, thought about all the nights I'd spent staring at similar lights while keeping their operations running. "The kind that comes with fair market value," I said. And for the first time in 22 years, I hung up on a vice president. The real chaos was just beginning. The next 3 days were like watching a slow-motion car accident from a safe distance. I didn't log into any company systems, didn't check my work email, didn't answer calls from numbers I recognized. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took care of myself. I slept past 6 a.m. for the first time, since my kids were babies. I had lunch with my neighbor Pete, a retired mechanic who'd been telling me for months that I looked tired. I even called Emma at college, not about tuition or grades, just to hear how she was doing. "Dad, you sound different," she said. "Relaxed, maybe?" "Just taking a few days to think about some things." "Good. Mom always said you worked too hard for people who didn't appreciate you. Smart kid. Takes after her mother in all the right ways." But Dataflow wasn't sitting quietly. Through my network of former colleagues, I heard the story in pieces. Scott had tried to handle the regional transport crisis using the standard runbooks. When those failed, he'd escalated to day shift supervisors who knew even less about the legacy AS400 interfaces than he did. By Thursday morning, 3 major clients were experiencing processing delays, and penalty clauses were triggering across multiple contracts. Kevin Walsh had called an emergency meeting. Someone leaked that they were considering bringing in external consultants at $300 an hour to diagnose problems I could have fixed in my sleep. That's when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Brian Miller, this is Rebecca Miller from TechStream Solutions. We got your name from Mike Rodriguez. He says you might be interested in exploring new opportunities." I almost hung up out of habit. For 22 years, recruiter calls had been interruptions, distractions from whatever crisis needed my immediate attention. "What kind of opportunities?" I asked instead. "Senior infrastructure architect. Day shift, normal business hours. We're looking for someone with deep experience in logistics systems and vendor integrations. Mike mentioned you have extensive background with legacy platform modernization. What's the salary range for someone with your experience?" "We're thinking $118,000 to $125,000 base, plus quarterly performance bonuses. Full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, and rotating on-call that actually rotates. No one person carries the entire load." I did the math quickly. $118,000 was a $29,000 jump from my current $89,000. More than 5 times the retention bonus Dataflow had offered me. "When would you want to meet?" I asked. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Professional, straightforward, no games. They asked technical questions I could answer in my sleep, scenario-based problems I'd solved dozens of times. The team seemed competent, collaborative, and refreshingly honest about their challenges. "We're not looking for a hero," the hiring manager explained. "We're looking for someone who can build sustainable systems and transfer knowledge effectively. We've learned that single points of failure are bad for business and bad for people." They made an offer that afternoon. $122,000 base, $5,000 signing bonus, start date flexible based on my availability. I accepted without negotiating. Not because I couldn't have pushed for more, but because I was done playing games where the rules changed based on who was asking. Meanwhile, the situation at Dataflow was deteriorating. On Friday, I got a call from Jennifer, my ex-wife. "Your old company called me," she said, "looking for emergency contact information. Something about critical operational issues. I told them you were probably fishing or something." "Thanks." "Brian, what the hell is going on over there?" I explained the retention bonus situation, the walkout, the aftermath. Jennifer listened without interrupting, which was always a sign she was processing something important. "You know what this sounds like?" she said finally. "What?" "That time Jake tried to negotiate a later bedtime by threatening to never sleep again. Except you're not the kid in this scenario. No. You're the parent who finally stopped enabling bad behavior." The following Monday, Kevin Walsh called me directly. "Brian, we need to talk. In person. Name your terms." "I don't work there anymore," I said. "You haven't submitted a resignation letter. I don't need to. At-will employment, remember? Look, mistakes were made with the retention program. We're prepared to make adjustments. Significant adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" $25,000 retention bonus, immediate payment, plus a promotion to senior night operations lead with a $15,000 salary increase, and we'll document a clear succession plan so you're not carrying the entire load anymore. I did the math. $104,000 total salary, $25,000 bonus. Still less than TechStream's base offer, and it kept me locked into nights for at least another year. "That's a generous offer," I said. "So you'll consider it?" "I already have. The answer is no." "Brian, be reasonable. You've been with us for 22 years. This is your career, your future. You're right. It is my future. That's why I'm making a different choice." "What do you mean?" I start my new job next Monday. Day shift, fair compensation, and a company that understands the difference between being valued and being valuable." Silence. Long enough that I could hear him breathing. "You can't just leave. We have clients, obligations, systems that depend on your knowledge. You should have thought about that before you decided my knowledge was worth $5,000. I hung up and immediately felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Freedom. The resignation letter was 2 paragraphs. Professional, factual, no accusations. Last day worked. Forwarding address for final paperwork. Reason for departure. Career advancement opportunity. Legal signed off within hours. They weren't trying to keep me anymore. They were trying to minimize damage. 2 weeks later, Emma's tuition was paid on time. Jake had college applications ready for review. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying a work phone that could ring at 2 a.m. with someone else's emergency. I heard through the industry grapevine that Dataflow eventually hired 2 contractors to replace me. Cost them $280,000 annually plus benefits plus the consultants they brought in to document my institutional knowledge. Scott lasted through his 12-month commitment but didn't get another retention bonus. Lisa took a strategic role at another company, which is corporate speak for getting quietly pushed out. The audit report never circulated, but the effects did. New policies, documentation requirements, compensation guidelines to ensure consistency and fairness. As for me, my first month at TechStream was everything they'd promised. Challenging work, collaborative team, reasonable hours. When my phone rang at 2 a.m. one night during my second week, it wasn't a work crisis. It was a wrong number. I silenced it and went back to sleep without thinking about uptime percentages or vendor SLAs or whether someone somewhere was panicking about a system I was supposed to fix. Because the truth is, walking out at 3 a.m. wasn't the dramatic part. The dramatic part was realizing that after 22 years, I finally understood the difference between being indispensable and being respected. They paid to keep the wrong person. I just stopped pretending that was my problem to solve. Some lessons are expensive. For Dataflow, that lesson cost them about $300,000 and a lot of sleepless nights. For me, it was worth every penny they didn't want to pay.